Okay, so you've brought us some pretty interesting documents today.
Yeah,
Two declassified documents
right.
that kind of center around the 1961 World Youth Festival in Berlin.
Exactly.
And we're going to be looking specifically at the activities of Colombian delegates
Hmm.
in Europe around that time.
Right.
So let's dive in and see what these records reveal.
Yeah, good idea.
So the first document that we have is a confidential report
Okay.
from January 29, 1962.
All right.
And this details information that was obtained by a local detective
Oh, wow.
in Berlin
Okay.
during August and September 1961.
Mm-hmm.
And it concerns the World Youth Festival.
Okay.
And then alongside that,
Yeah.
we have a confidential dispatch
Okay.
from the American Embassy in Paris,
Oh, right.
dated July 14, 1961,
Got it.
which gives us kind of an earlier look at
Yeah.
some of the movement and intentions
Oh,
of Colombian delegates in Europe.
Okay.
So what we're going to try to do today is really kind of go deep into these documents
Yeah.
and pull out kind of the core intelligence and insights that they offer
Sounds good.
without getting bogged down
Yeah.
and kind of too much detail.
Yeah.
So let's start by taking a look at the Berlin report,
Okay.
the one from January 1962.
Sounds good.
This report is based on information from a local Berlin detective.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to center quite a bit on the Colombian delegation.
Yeah, it really focuses on their activities at the World Youth Festival.
Right. And it uses the term startling activity,
It does.
which is
Putting it lightly.
it's a pretty good word for it.
Yeah.
It suggests that the Colombian delegates were actively trying to persuade other Latin American delegates
Mm-hmm.
to visit the Soviet zone of Berlin.
Yeah, and it wasn't just persuading, was it?
No, it suggests that they were using both threats
Wow.
and promises of financial aid
Really?
to encourage these visits.
Yeah, seems like a pretty determined effort
Yeah,
to guide these young people over to East Berlin,
right.
even if it was just for a visit.
Yeah, and the report even goes so far as to use the term nefarious
Yeah, that's a strong
to
word.
describe these activities.
Definitely raises some red flags.
It does.
Makes you wonder who else they might have been targeting.
Right, and the report actually does give us some names
Oh, really?
of delegates from other Latin American countries
Okay.
who were present in Berlin.
Interesting.
But of course, it's important to remember that this is,
Secondhand information.
secondhand intelligence.
Right, and the report itself even acknowledges that, the validity of this information isn't 100% certain.
Right, it's just what this one detective was able to put together.
Yeah.
But the author of the report obviously felt that it was significant enough to document and share.
Yeah, and it really gives us a window into what people were thinking and feeling at the time.
Right, it shows how much anxiety and suspicion there was surrounding this event.
Definitely.
Okay, so this Berlin report lists several Venezuelan delegates.
Okay, who are identified in Berlin.
All right.
First, we have Juvenal Herrera,
Okay.
identified as a law student
Mm-hmm.
and labeled dangerous.
Dangerous.
Yeah. Then there's Francisca Herrera,
Okay.
also marked dangerous.
Interesting.
And then we have Armando Rojo,
Mm-hmm.
law student in Caracas.
All right.
Nicholas Hurtado,
Okay.
a local theater actor.
Interesting.
And Yolanda Steffens de Rojas,
Okay.
who is married to Mr. Rojo.
Got it.
Now, that dangerous label
Yeah.
is pretty striking.
It is.
It makes you wonder what they did.
Yeah, like what would make them stand out?
Right, were they really active at the festival?
Right.
Were they seen talking to the wrong people or
Yeah.
what?
Who knows? It's one of those details that raises more questions than it answers,
It does.
but it definitely shows just how carefully these people were being watched.
Yeah.
It was a very tense atmosphere.
Right.
The report also lists some of the Ecuadorian delegates who were in Berlin.
Oh,
We have Enrique Gilbert,
Okay.
a writer,
Mm-hmm.
and Alba Calderon de Gilbert.
Okay.
Then there's Patricia Cuevas,
Hmm?
who was listed as a Prague medical student,
Interesting.
and Patricia Cueva Jaramillo identified as a secretary.
Okay.
And finally, the report gives us some details about the Cuban delegation,
Okay.
which included some pretty prominent figures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the Soviets were really engaging with people from all walks of life,
Mhm.
artists, academics, even merchants.
Right.
This wasn't just about reaching out to student activists.
Right.
This was a much broader effort to build relationships.
Interesting.
And the fact that intelligence agencies were keeping tabs on all these people just shows how seriously they were taking it.
Yeah.
So among the Cubans, there was Nicholas Guillen,
Okay.
the famous poet and writer, Lisandro Otero, a journalist,
Okay.
Antonio Nunez Jimenez,
Hmm.
a professor and director of pedagogy,
Okay.
who was apparently pretty heavily involved in propaganda.
Oh, wow.
And even in arranging accommodations in Paris.
Really?
Yeah. Then there's Francisco Rodriguez Fernandez,
Okay.
a student,
Mm-hmm.
and Jose Canetti,
Okay.
a merchant who lived in Santiago de Cuba.
Wow. That's a pretty diverse group of people.
It is.
What do you think that says about the festival?
Well, it seems like it wasn't just about, typical youth activism. This was a much broader platform for engagement.
Right.
It was about connecting with people from all different parts of society.
Right.
And as we've seen, these connections were seen as incredibly important.
Right. Especially during the Cold War.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to the second document now.
Go.
The dispatch from the American Embassy in Paris,
All right.
dated July 14, 1961.
Got it.
So this document predates the Berlin report.
Right. So it gives us a kind of a sneak peek
Yeah.
at what was going on before the festival.
Right. It focuses on the Colombian delegation
Exactly.
and their movements and intentions.
So this dispatch basically lays out information that an informant
Okay.
gave to the local police
Mm-hmm.
about delegates from various countries,
Right.
including Colombia,
Okay.
who were expected to attend the third Festival Mundial de Juventudes,
Got it.
first in Helsinki
Okay.
and then in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And the key piece of information here
Yeah.
relates to the Colombian delegation's travel plans
Okay.
and what the informant believed were their real intentions.
Interesting.
So according to this source, the Colombian delegates were traveling with documents
Okay.
that said that they were going to Helsinki
Mm-hmm.
for the youth festival.
All right.
But the informant believed that that wasn't the whole story.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What did they think was going on?
Well, they believed that their real plan was to travel to Moscow.
To Moscow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
About a month.
A month.
Yeah.
That's a pretty long time.
For a month in Moscow.
Yeah.
Before even getting to the festival in Berlin.
Yeah. That definitely suggests that there was more to this trip than meets the eye.
Right. It makes you wonder what they were really up to.
Yeah. What could they have been doing there for a whole month?
Right.
It's not like they were just sightseeing.
No, definitely not.
So what do you think this suggests about their agenda?
Well, it sounds like they might have been undergoing some kind of preparation
Right.
or training.
Yeah, maybe they were getting briefed on Soviet ideology.
Right.
Or learning how to spread propaganda.
It's possible.
It's definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
And to make things even more suspicious.
Right.
The informant also said that they thought the Colombian delegation was going to stay in the Soviet bloc,
Really?
even after the festival in Berlin was over.
So they weren't planning on going home anytime soon.
No, it sounds like they were planning on sticking around.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, this raised some serious concerns for the informant.
Of course.
I mean, they were worried about what these delegates might be exposed to
Right.
during that time.
Right. What kind of indoctrination they might be undergoing.
Exactly. They were worried that these young people might be turned against their own countries.
That's a pretty scary thought.
It is. It really highlights the paranoia of the Cold War and the fear of communist influence.
Right.
And then there's this other interesting detail.
Okay.
The informant actually thought that the Colombian delegation might not even really participate in the festival in Helsinki.
Really?
Yeah, like they might just go there briefly
Hmm.
and then head straight to Moscow.
So Helsinki was just a cover.
Exactly. It was just
Yeah.
a way to get to the Soviet Union.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty wild when you think about it.
It is.
So when we look at these two documents together,
Yeah.
we see that the Colombian delegation is definitely at the center of things.
Right. They're the ones that everyone seems to be worried about.
Exactly.
We have this earlier dispatch suggesting that they went to Moscow
Right.
for some kind of political indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, we have the Berlin report, which accuses them of actively trying to influence other Latin American delegates,
Right.
maybe as a result of what they learned in Moscow. It really makes you think about the connections between these two events.
Yeah, it's a pretty compelling narrative.
It is.
First, they go to Moscow and get indoctrinated,
Right.
and then they go to Berlin and try to spread the Soviet gospel.
Right.
It's a classic Cold War story.
It is.
But it's important to remember that these are just allegations.
Right.
We don't know for sure what happened.
Right. We just have these reports.
Yeah, these are just snippets of information that were gathered by intelligence agencies.
Right,
so we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions.
Right.
But they do give us a fascinating glimpse into how these international youth gatherings were viewed during the Cold War.
Right. They weren't seen as just, fun cultural exchanges.
Right.
They were seen as potential battlegrounds.
Exactly.
For ideological influence.
Yeah. These were seen as opportunities for the Soviets to spread their propaganda and to recruit new followers.
Right.
And the West was obviously very concerned about this.
Right. They were doing everything they could to monitor these events.
Exactly.
And to track the movements of these delegates.
Yeah. They wanted to know who was going where and what they were up to.
Right.
So these documents are really valuable, even if they don't tell us the whole story.
Right. They give us a lot to think about.
They do.
So just to recap for everyone.
Okay.
We've been looking at these 2 declassified documents that shed light on the 1961 World Youth Festival in Berlin.
Right.
And the main takeaway here is that the Colombian delegation was under a lot of scrutiny.
Definitely.
We have this early intelligence report suggesting that they might have gone to Moscow for political indoctrination.
Right.
And then later on, we have the Berlin report, which accuses them of trying to influence other Latin American delegates to visit East Berlin.
It's a pretty damning picture.
It is.
But as we've said, we have to remember that this is just intelligence.
Right.
It's not necessarily the whole truth.
Right.
But it does give us a sense of how these events were perceived at the time.
Right. And how seriously they were taken.
Exactly.
So this brings us to a final thought for you to ponder.
Right.
When you think about the time period and the nature of these international youth festivals, what do you think was the broader significance of these intelligence gathering efforts?
Interesting question.
Is it possible that there were other interpretations for the activities that were described in these documents?
Yeah.
Were these Colombian delegates really acting under orders from the Soviet Union? Or could their motivations have been more complex?
Yeah.
It's something to think about.
It is.
These documents raise a lot of questions.
They do.
About how information was gathered and interpreted during the Cold War.
It's a very different time. And it's hard for us to fully understand it now.
It is. But these documents give us a glimpse into that world.
That they do.
And that's what makes them so fascinating.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing these documents to our attention today.
It was my pleasure.
This was a really insightful deep dive.
Thanks. I enjoyed it.
I did too. And I hope everyone listening learned something as well.
I hope so too.
All right, everyone. Until next time.
See you then.